You know, throughout history, nations have gambled everything on grand economic visions. Ambition, my friends, is a potent drug. But few gambles have been as spectacular, as heartbreaking, or as utterly ruinous as the one undertaken by Scotland at the close of the 17th century. Imagine an entire nation, fueled by a burning desire for prosperity and independence, pouring its very soul into a single audacious scheme, a scheme they believed would elevate them to global power, but instead led them to the brink of annihilation. This is the story of Darien. In the late 1600s, Scotland was an economic backwater. Its powerful neighbor, England, dominated global trade. The Scots watched with envy as English merchants grew rich from colonies and exotic goods. They yearned for their own slice of the pie, a way to escape poverty and assert their place in the world. They needed a visionary, a bold plan, and a whole lot of capital to break free from this economic stagnation and claim their destiny on the world stage. Enter William Paterson. Now, Paterson wasn't just any dreamer. This was the brilliant financial mind who helped found the Bank of England in 1694. He understood global commerce, banking, and the power of credit. His latest, most ambitious idea? A colony in Darien on the Isthmus of Panama, a place he argued that could become the crossroads of the world, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific, making Scotland the master of global trade and untold riches. Paterson envisioned a new kind of empire, not based on conquest, but on commerce. Darien, strategically located between the two great oceans, would be a free trade zone, a hub where goods from Asia, the Americas, and Europe converged. Spanish silver, Chinese silks, West Indian sugar, all flowing through Scottish hands. It was a tantalizing prospect, a shortcut to unimaginable wealth and power that captivated a struggling nation and offered a beacon of hope for their future economic prosperity. To fund this colossal undertaking, Paterson formed the Company of Scotland Trading to Africa and the Indies, better known simply as the Darien Company. They initially sought investment in London and Amsterdam, but here's the kicker. England, wary of Scottish competition and influenced by its powerful East India Company, actively sabotaged these efforts. The English Parliament, pressured by influential merchants, even passed a resolution condemning the scheme, making it illegal for English subjects to invest in it.
Undeterred, the Scots turned inward. They embraced the scheme with a fervor that bordered on national madness. From impoverished crofters to wealthy nobles, virtually every Scot who could afford it invested. 1/5, some say even a quarter, of all the money circulating in Scotland was poured into the Darien Company. This wasn't just an investment. It was a patriotic duty, a collective dream for national independence, and a desperate gamble against economic obscurity. The sheer scale of public enthusiasm was unprecedented. The entire nation was gripped by a speculative fever. Shares were oversubscribed in record time. Men and women, young and old, mortgaged their homes, sold their possessions, and emptied their life savings, convinced this was Scotland's moment. They dreamed of a golden age, of a Scotland transformed from a small, struggling kingdom into a powerful player on the global stage, thanks to their collective sacrifice and belief in this venture. By 1698, the company had raised an astonishing £400,000 sterling, a staggering sum for the time, roughly equivalent to half of Scotland's national capital. With this war chest, they bought and outfitted 5 impressive ships: the Caledonia, the St. Andrew, the Unicorn, the Dolphin, and the Endeavour. These weren't just vessels. They were floating embodiments of Scotland's hopes, carrying the future of a nation across the treacherous Atlantic. On July the 14th, 1698, the first expedition set sail from Leith. Aboard were 1,200 Scots, soldiers, merchants, farmers, and their families, all volunteers, eager to forge a new life and a new destiny for their homeland. They carried provisions, tools, and a burning belief in Paterson's vision. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of poignant farewells and fervent hope, as the ships vanished over the horizon, carrying Scotland's collective dreams. The journey itself was grueling. Months at sea, crammed in tight quarters, with poor sanitation and limited fresh food. Sickness quickly spread through the ranks. Many didn't survive the voyage, succumbing to disease and the brutal conditions of long-distance sailing. This early loss of life was a grim prelude to the challenges ahead, testing the resolve of those who dreamed of a new world, a stark reminder of the harsh realities of colonial expansion.
In November 1698, the surviving settlers reached the coast of Darien. They landed in a sheltered bay, which they optimistically named Caledonia, and began building their colony. They erected a fort, Fort St. Andrew, and started clearing land for a settlement. The initial excitement was palpable. After months of hardship, they were finally on the land that would make Scotland rich, ready to build their new, prosperous future from the ground up. But the Panamanian jungle was an unforgiving adversary. The tropical climate, with its intense heat and torrential rains, quickly took its toll. European clothes were ill-suited, and European farming methods proved ineffective against the alien soil and relentless humidity. The vibrant, teeming ecosystem was beautiful, but also harbored countless dangers that the settlers were completely unprepared for, turning their dream landscape into a hostile, alien environment. Disease, especially malaria and dysentery, ravaged the colony. Within months, hundreds succumbed. The colonists, weakened and demoralized, found their grand trading plans falling apart. They had brought European trinkets, expecting eager local merchants, but the indigenous Kuna people had little need for their goods. There was no established network for the vast global trade Paterson had envisioned. The dream of a bustling entrepot faded into a sickly, humid nightmare. To make matters worse, the Spanish, who claimed the entire region as their own, viewed the Scottish presence as an invasion. They immediately launched attacks, raiding supply lines and harassing the fledgling settlement. The Scots, already weakened by disease and starvation, were now embroiled in a military conflict they were ill-prepared to fight, further straining their dwindling resources and crushing their already fragile morale. The dream of peaceable commerce was shattered by imperial rivalry. Then came the ultimate betrayal. England, bowing to pressure from Spain and its own East India Company, issued a proclamation forbidding any English colony in the West Indies from providing aid or provisions to the Scots in Darien. This wasn't just non-support, it was an active blockade. Isolated and starving, the settlers were effectively condemned by their closest neighbor, a chilling act of diplomatic abandonment that sealed their fate. By June of 1699, after just 8 months, the first expedition was in tatters. Over 400 people had died from disease and starvation. The survivors, broken in body and spirit, made the agonizing decision to abandon the colony. They crammed onto their remaining ships, leaving behind their dead and their shattered dreams, hoping to somehow make it back to Scotland. It was a humiliating retreat, leaving behind only graves and the ruins of ambition. News of the disaster slowly trickled back to Scotland, but not before a second, much larger expedition, oblivious to the catastrophe, was already underway. Nearly 1,300 more settlers, on 4 new ships, full of fresh hope and patriotic zeal, sailed from the Clyde in August 1699. The second wave carried even more of Scotland's precious capital, driven by the same blind optimism that doomed the first. The irony was tragic, a nation sending more sons to their doom. They arrived at Darien in November 1699 to a horrifying sight. The first colony was deserted, overgrown, and littered with graves. The jungle had reclaimed much of what little had been built. The sense of despair must have been immense. Yet, with stubborn Scottish resolve, they attempted to rebuild. But the same plagues and problems immediately resurfaced. Their hope quickly turned to the same bitter despair that consumed their predecessors. The Spanish, emboldened by the English in action, launched a full-scale assault. A formidable Spanish force besieged Fort St. Andrew for over a month, cutting off supplies and bombarding the already weakened Scots. The colonists, racked by disease and starvation, mounted a valiant but ultimately futile defense. Their numbers dwindled daily, and their supplies were almost entirely depleted, leaving them with no hope of resistance. Finally, in April of 1700, the remnants of the second expedition were forced to surrender to the Spanish. They negotiated an honorable withdrawal, agreeing to leave Darien forever. only a few hundred of the original 2,500 settlers ever made it back to Scotland. The dream of Caledonia, the crossroads of the world, lay buried in the Panamanian jungle, a monument to a nation's hubris and suffering. The cost in human life was devastating.
The financial fallout in Scotland was catastrophic. The £400,000 invested was gone. Banks failed, fortunes were wiped out, and countless ordinary families were plunged into destitution. The national economy was utterly crippled, far worse than before the scheme began. Scotland, once hopeful for independence and wealth, was now a broken nation, burdened by overwhelming debt and widespread poverty that seemed impossible to overcome. The Darien Scheme had not only drained Scotland's wealth, but also its spirit. The economic ruin left the nation vulnerable, weakened, and deeply in debt. It severely eroded Scotland's ability to function as an independent kingdom. This profound vulnerability, combined with persistent English political maneuvering, set the stage for one of the most significant political events in British history. The weight of this debt was crushing, forcing the Scots to consider desperate measures. In 1707, just 7 years after the final abandonment of Darien, Scotland reluctantly signed the Act of Union with England. This abolished the Scottish Parliament and created the Kingdom of Great Britain. A key incentive for the Scottish nobility to agree to this was the equivalent, a payment from England to compensate for Scotland's Darien losses and take on its national debt. It was a bitter pill, essentially buying Scotland's independence. So the Darien Scheme, intended to secure Scotland's economic freedom and global dominance, ironically led directly to the end of its independent statehood. It's a stark reminder that even the most brilliant financial minds and the most passionate national ambitions can be undone by unforeseen challenges, geopolitical realities, and ruthless competition. The legacy of Darien lives on as a cautionary tale of hubris, hope, and the brutal consequences of a gamble gone wrong. A nation's dream shattered forever. The story of Darien is more than just a historical footnote. It's a powerful lesson in economic history. It demonstrates how speculative bubbles, fueled by nationalistic fervor, can blind even the most astute investors. It highlights the brutal realities of colonial expansion and the unforgiving nature of international power dynamics. Ultimately, it's a testament to how financial disaster can reshape political landscapes, forging new nations from the ashes of shattered dreams and forever altering the course of history.